a veteran of the fighting in bloody Kansas, would help divide the House further with his next and final militant effort against pro-slavery forces. In Kansas, in 1856, John Brown and his sons had led the Potawatomi Massacre, in which supporters of slavery were dragged from their homes and slaughtered with a broadsword. In 1859, John Brown focused his attention on a new target, the government armory and arsenal at Harper's Ferry. He planned to use those weapons to arm what he expected to be an army of fugitive slaves that would join him. But he failed to convince one important escaped slave. John Brown had long been a friend of Frederick Douglass. Douglass had preached pacifism prior to 1850, but in the wake of the Fugitive Slave Law, he believed that who would be free must himself strike the first blow. Brown appealed to Douglass to join him in the raid. Douglass tried to talk Brown out of the mission, but failed. He later said,
"I told him, finally, that he was going into a steel trap from which there was no escape, and that I did not see it as my duty to follow him."
Douglass's prediction was correct. John Brown's mission was a failure. Half his men were killed during the raid, including one of Brown's sons. Most of the others, including John Brown himself, were captured and hanged. 4 men escaped, including another of Brown's sons. John Brown died by hanging on December 2nd, 1859. This was one more event to shock the consciences of the American people and to put them into opposing camps on the rightness of Brown's cause, if not his methods. The raid on Harper's Ferry would be seen by many as the first shots fired in the Civil War. Decades later, Frederick Douglass would ask an audience about the success of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry.
If John Brown did not end the war that ended slavery, he did at least begin the war that ended slavery. Until this blow was struck, the prospect for freedom was dim, shadowy, and uncertain. The irrepressible conflict was one of words, votes, and compromises. When John Brown stretched forth his arm, the sky was cleared. The time for compromises was gone. The armed host of freedom stood face to face over the chasm of a broken union, and the clash of arms was at hand. The South staked all upon getting possession of the federal government, and failing to do that, drew the sword of rebellion and thus made her own, and not Brown's, the lost cause of the century.
In the election of 1860, the South made that bid for control of the federal government. All of the conflicts of the past decades came to a head in the presidential election. In the turmoil of the 1850s, the major American political parties were falling apart. The Whigs were essentially gone. Northern anti-slavery Whigs joined the new Republican Party, which was entirely sectional. The Republican Party's anti-slavery stance, which varied in degree among its members, meant that it had no place in the South. Most Southern Whigs joined the new Constitutional Union Party. Meanwhile, the Democrats were torn across the Mason-Dixon line into Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats. Abraham Lincoln, a former U.S. representative, was nominated by the Republicans. John Bell, former senator from Tennessee, received the Constitutional Party nomination. The Southern Democrats nominated the sitting Vice President, John Breckinridge, and the Northern Democrats nominated Lincoln's old adversary, Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois. Lincoln was, in the eyes of many Republicans, a moderate on the slavery question. He was strongly opposed to its expansion into the territories, which he believed was in direct contrast with the intentions of the Founding Fathers. But he did not seek to eliminate slavery in those states where it was already permitted. Lincoln and Douglas battled in the North, while Bell and Breckinridge faced off in the South, though Douglas, unlike Lincoln, had some support in the South as well. Lincoln, as we all know today, was the final winner of the election, but it was no sure thing. He was not even on the ballot in most of the slave states. Of almost 1,000 counties in the 15 slaveholding states in 1860, Lincoln won only 2. Nationally, he had only 40% of the popular vote, but that was considerably higher than his nearest opponent, Stephen Douglas, with 29%. Lincoln won 180 out of 303 Electoral College votes, making him the clear winner. To do that, he had to sweep the free states of the North. The Southern states were outraged. Not a single ballot had been cast for Abraham Lincoln in 10 Southern states because he was not on the ballot, and yet now he was president. South Carolina moved first, seceding from the Union on December 20th, 1860. They cited Lincoln's election as an overt act of aggression by the North. That is, they did not claim to be seceding because they had been attacked, or because the federal government was attempting to divest them of their slaves, but because the result of the presidential election was itself an offense. Within a few months, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas had joined them. These states adopted a new constitution in February 1861 and declared themselves the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis of Mississippi was appointed president by the delegates, and Alexander Stephens of Georgia was appointed vice president. Alexander Stephens gave a speech the following month in which he outlined how this new constitution was superior to the original on the subject of slavery.
The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institutions. African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson in this forecast had anticipated this as a rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil they know now well how to deal with. But the general opinion of the men of that day was that somehow or other, in the order of providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstones rests upon the great truth that the Negro was not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth.
If anyone had any lingering doubts about the role of slavery in causing the Southern states to secede from the Union in 1861, Vice President Alexander Stephens' speech should have abolished those doubts. As he said, the cornerstone of the new government was the assertion that slavery was the natural condition of African Americans. Most still hoped that this secession crisis would not lead to war. A peace conference was held in Washington in February 1861, but the conference was unable to resolve the central issue of slavery, which had brought the crisis to a head. The conference failed to bring peace, but the 8 states which had not yet seceded still remained with the Union.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.